We're isolating the constituents we want, using the proper extraction methods, and concentrating on the constituents or the area of the fungi that's going to be most rich in that area as well, and that's a unique thing. And one of the things you might have seen me skip over back here that some of you guys, chemists, might have said, cadmium and lead. Those don't sound very good. And when I first read this, I had to say, cadmium. Is there something in the body is there some sort of process in the body that cadmium is required or something? No, there's not. It's just not good for us. It's a heavy metal. Well, how do we get these to be certified organic and cleansed of heavy metal products? This is an interesting thing. There's something called a P factor. And a P factor was developed by Paul Stamets, and it doesn't stand for Paul, it stands for Petri dish. And what it is, and it's very important in developing mushrooms, especially on a commercial size, is that if I take my mycelium, so I go on a wild craft and harvest my mushrooms, it's best that we then purify that mushroom. Again, why does it have all of these players? Why is it so nutrient dense? And why does it have heavy metals in it if there's heavy metals in the environment? Those mushrooms take that up. They're saprophytic. They decompose everything in their environment. This is one of the amazing things about mushrooms. And so they're going to be taking up all these nutrients. Again, that partially makes them prey and then leads them to produce antimicrobials we can use. But this includes heavy metals, and so as our Earth becomes more contaminated and heavy metals become more prevalent in our water and Earth supplies and so forth, the mushrooms are also going to take these up in some way, help to sequester these, if you will. But we don't want to be taking this in. So this P factor, what we can do is I take the mushroom and then I grow I can take some spores out of it and then grow the mycelium and inoculate my Petri medium with these spores. And these spores or mycelium will grow, and then they'll grow into mushrooms and so forth. And if I take a little bit of that mycelium and then plant it into a new Petri dish, I've done what's called a P1, or a P2, the second Petri dish. And then I do it again, I grow the mushrooms and so forth, and then I take the mycelium and I plant it into a third Petri dish, I have P3. At P3 to P4, P3, we have a completely organic product that then, therefore, is able to be relinquished of its heavy metals while still maintaining all of the other nutrients, which is a bit of a fascinating prospect. Now, what is important to recognize here that I like to say, when I grow my own mushrooms, I never think of these things. So, great minds think alike. I might be lagging a little bit, but I would never have thought of this. Is that when they go and they do P4, P5, P6, P7, P8, P9, P10, P20, P30. This is a great way of just kind of continuing the life cycle of the mushroom growth from this initial mycelium. Now note that I say mycelium and not mushrooms and so forth, because if we take the new mushroom, then it's a different process. But if we just keep using the mycelium, this is a time-conservative method and an economically conservative method to proliferate and produce more mushrooms. Well, I can purify them of all of the things that we don't want in there, these heavy metals, for instance. But at the same time, if I go all the way to P10, P15, P20, I actually am losing the vitality of that mushroom, losing essential constituents. It's no longer as robust and so forth. Very interesting. So all of these mushrooms that you'll see are grown between a P3 and a P10 factor to maintain their absolute highest concentration of constituents, and then that process is started over so that we can do this, so that the best, most potent mushrooms are done there, are delivered in the end product. So there you go. All of these different benefits for a number of different organ systems. Literally, I have a tough time doing this presentation because mushrooms, they confer properties across the body like no other medicine. They really have a tough time being boxed into a single idea or single action, if you will. But I won't go through this, but you can take a look at it there. So, do you guys have any questions so far on anything that I have said before we get into these products? Yes?
Just on your brochure, it does say from the forest to our or whatever, it says from the forest to our farm, to you or whatever, so are you taking them from the forest in sustainable ways? Like you're just taking the mycelium component and then doing the P, or however you call it, the extraction?
The P factor extraction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a great question. So, you know, one of the things about mushrooms is, yes, absolutely, complete sustainability. More than anything with medicine, Paul Stamets is involved in mushrooms for eco-sustainability. If you go and look at his work, there's a little bit of work done with medicine, and he does this, but by and large, his love affair and the reason that he got into this was the reasons that he was able to see that mushrooms were able to change the planet. Nobody cares more about the planet, not even David Suzuki, than Paul Stamets. If you get to watch a couple of his videos or listen to him talk, read a few of his books, you will see that. When we talk about the process of the harvesting, so they'll actually go and harvest these out of the old growth forest for the most part and so forth, and then they'll end up growing them inside because that's really a safety precaution. You don't want to just kind of mass harvest and give them out because of heavy metals and other contaminants that can be present. That being said, absolutely. So you'll see things like agarikon, which is an endangered species, and you will see that when they go and grow agarikon, it's done in a very respectful way to preserve that mushroom. But if I go and I pull a mushroom out of the forest, as if any of you guys have grown mushrooms on your own, you will know that literally, if I take spores of that mushroom, I can grow enough mushrooms for Calgary out of that one mushroom. Literally, I can just reproliferate that and reproliferate that. And so when they do and go get mushrooms, they are doing it eco-cultivation. But make no mistake, mushrooms, one of the amazing things, and if you go and read Paul Stamets' book, Mycelium Running, he'll talk about some of the novel techniques for some very rare mushrooms to keep growing, to show you that you just need a single little extraction of some spores and you can keep that guy going and deliver very high quality medicines for as long as you would like.
Can mushrooms detoxify human toxic chemicals that we have made?
Are they going to act as a chelator?
No. Well, yeah, I guess. Like, can they break it down? Can they break down some human chemicals?
You know, if we look at heavy metals, for instance, you know, we can't break those down any farther. Are they going to sequester them? Probably not, because these mushrooms they're no longer acting as saprophytic organisms. That happens.
I meant as mycelium in the ground. Like when we dump our toxins into the ground, can they, other than hydrocarbons, but other?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
absolutely.
It can break down all of those types of
different ones. I mean, it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the different enzymes and the different waste products you have. But if you just look at, again, the life cycle of mushrooms, they break down. You give it to a mushroom. If you've ever seen mold, you know, it'll take everything. If you have wood in your house and you get it mold infested, that fungi is going to eat all the chemicals in the mold, and it's going to take them in, and it's going to break down and recycle everything. They have this amazing ability to do that. So.
Did you tell us already what medium Chuck uses to grow mushrooms?
I have no idea.
Oh, would you mind?
I don't know. I don't know. So these are grown on different mediums, just depending on the mushroom and so forth as well. So, okay. So, sorry, I can't answer that question. Did you have a question? No?
Yeah, I do. Can you talk about the standard?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. That's a good question. I'm glad somebody back there asked that. So I promised you guys that I would tell you a little bit more about his relationship with the FDA and so forth. This is an interesting thing. So if I want to bring a mushroom to the market and I want community to sell it, I have to go through regulatory boards. And in the States, this is the FDA. And I need to demonstrate that my cloud mushroom or turkey tail mushroom is actually a turkey tail mushroom. Well, the FDA has to use a standard for that. And what's the standard that they use? If you're comparing anybody's mushroom, if anybody goes and puts a mushroom to market, you get compared to Paul Stamets' mushrooms because of all of the work and work that all of the literature he's been published in and the high standards he's in. So you're comparing against Paul Stamets' mushroom. He's basically the gold standard for having the constituents, the quality, and so forth, as deemed by the FDA. And I like to say, there's an irony in that because, of course, then Paul Stamets has to get his mushrooms compared to Paul Stamets' mushrooms when the time comes. So there you go. But anyways, so I think that's a bit of an interesting point, and I think it just speaks to his involvement in larger communities. When we jump into the turkey tail here, the Trametes versicolor, also known as Coriolis versicolor, it has a number of different research publications on it in well-designed, large clinical controlled trials, well-funded, and you'll see thousands of participants in these studies, things for colon cancer, lung cancer, estrogen-positive breast cancers. Estrogen-positive breast cancer trial was done with Paul Stamets through the American Cancer Society, and they had just gone through the preliminary stage, which showed very good results, and they're now going into their larger design control trials. Turkey tail is definitely one of those tumoricidal as well as less indirect anti-tumor activities. Indirect by amplifying the immune response, again, through things like increasing natural killer cell activity by dozens of times, increasing interleukin activity, improving the body's macrophage counts and so forth. It also has a broad spectrum antimicrobial property, so if you have an acute infection, a product like this is going to be quite good at dealing with that infection. And it also has these triterpenes to be able to deal with inflammatory conditions, cardiovascular disease, post-concussion. You guys can probably think of a number of other inflammatory diseases that are going on in the body. And of course, that's certainly relevant, and the potency and the ability to do that is great in a medicinal product, especially when we're able to balance it or have the same thing to act as an anti-inflammatory and paradoxically show that it drives up the immune system. That's incredible. That's, you know, I mean, if a drug company would have created that ability, we all would have heard of that for sure. So a great medicine here, and Paul Stamets talks on his TED Med talk about the use of this. He helped to heal his mother alongside using conventional medical therapies, as well as using high doses of turkey tail for, I believe she had stage 4 breast cancer, and of course they told her she wasn't going to live a couple months, and there she was years later, free of her cancer. Very interesting anecdotal story. It might even put you into some tears if you go and you watch his TED Med talk. It's really amazing. But again, it has really great research on this. And one of the interesting things is that the magnitude of effect for being able to treat cancers in the evidence is large, very large. I like to say, and this is my own personal values, you guys don't have to agree, you can agree or disagree with it, but I think that it's unethical for me to guide someone away from conventional cancer therapy. I just believe that as a physician. And at the same token, I also believe that it's unethical for the allopathic community to guide people away from using complementary medicines such as these mushrooms that have huge roles to play in certain cancers. I think that by being able to combine them, we can improve the overall outcomes and efficacies of medicines. Not only do I believe that, but these studies showed that these are safe with conventional cancer therapies, improve the effectiveness of those therapies, and decrease the side effect profile of them. Absolutely, people should be on these when the cancer is indicated for something like this, in my opinion. And one of the interesting things about all of these mushrooms, a number of the mushrooms we'll talk about here, is that they increase glutathione levels in the body, which is our body's most potent antioxidant here. And that's important because our glutathione is depleted under any inflammatory condition. That makes sense. We produce a lot of free radicals in inflammation, and our glutathione is being used up. Being able to recycle this is important. For myself, in particular, for concussion patients, I like to do IV glutathione for them, and can see very significant benefits really quite quickly. But if we're able to take in medicines that substantially increase our body's own endogenous glutathione stores and numbers, we can do a lot of benefit there. Glutathione is one of those supplements that we can't really take orally because it breaks down so easily in the stomach and so forth, and poor absorbability. But if we're using these that therefore upregulate them through the action of the liver and so forth, that's a different story. So I guess that's turkey tail. Cordyceps sinensis. This is an interesting mushroom that acts as a parasite. So it's a parasitic fungi. What happens is that the mycelium feed on the larvae of caterpillars, and the caterpillars then, that's basically the medium they grow on. Caterpillars grow up with some of that in their body, and voila, as the mycelium kind of grows and potentiates itself, up springs this mushroom through the head of our caterpillar. And this is something that grows in the Tibetan Plateau. Interestingly, this along with reishi are used for altitude sickness, and so they improve the body's ability to exchange oxygen at the level of the lungs. I've seen some reports as well in the evidence to show that this actually might improve EPO production, which helps to improve red blood cell numbers. EPO is a hormone that's produced at the level of the kidneys, and so this can help do that. And you say, well, Dr. Roth, we live in Calgary. I've never met anybody who's had altitude sickness here. I haven't either. I'm waiting for them, but when they do, I'm going to give them some cordyceps. And actually, this is used on the preventative side on the front end. But it's relevant, not because we're at such high altitudes, but because I'm sure we know lots of people who have low energy and fatigue, elderly patients, poor oxygen exchanges, individuals who are having restrictive lung diseases, who need more oxygen intake and exchange. That's interesting talk when we talk about asthmas and inflammatory or restrictive lung diseases, because there's triterpenes in this as well, which are going to help to relax the bronchioles and going to act as an anti-inflammatory on those pathways. But again, helping to improve the exchange of oxygen. I can think of a number of different patients that this would be good for, including things like COPD, simply low energy, aging population. Athletes, absolutely as well. I'm running a marathon this weekend out in Kelowna, and I have been absolutely stocking up on this. I'm either going to definitely qualify for Boston, or I'm going to overdose on cordyceps. One of the two, I'm not sure, but I'll let you know, or you'll find out on my return. Anyways, this has an ability to improve athletic performance. In the 80s, the Chinese were in international competitions, and the female runners in the 10K smashed the world record by 45 seconds. Unheard of, unless we're taking drugs. And they were clean, and they asked, how did you do this? And they said, well, hard work and cordyceps mushroom. All of the team was taking cordyceps, and they absolutely dosed them up. This is interesting. This is used to help improve libido and sexual function. In one study with this, over 60% of the participants had an improvement in their sexual function and their libido. That's a big number that's a pretty big number for a study. It also dilates the aorta by 40% under times of stress. Wow, amazing again for people who are having not enough oxygen going throughout the body. But I can think of for anxieties and depressions and other OCDs and so forth like this, some of these mental health conditions. One of the things I like to look at with my patients is, are we getting enough oxygen to all of the organs of the body, and in particular the brain? I look for things like low blood pressure if we're not getting enough perfusion at the level of the brain. I'm not saying that depressions and anxieties are necessarily all going to be cured, but I think that it can form an important role and an important component to that. So something like this. Again, obviously other individuals who might not be getting enough oxygen through their body, elderly and aging, stressed populations as well, where we're in kind of a constant inflammatory phase and so forth. And this mushroom is also a very good adaptogen. So good for modulating the stress response, very much the same way as we kind of conventionally will use reishi mushroom, which will be next. This also has anti-cancer properties, antimicrobial properties, immunomodulating properties, these triterpenes that act as anti-inflammatory properties, you name it, but we could go on, but we're going to keep moving. Again, the complexity of the chemicals, the mycochemicals in here are phenomenal, and the absolute broad spectrum in which these mushrooms are able to enact large health changes for individuals. For me, as a physician who likes to cull the literature as best I can and really do comparatives, mushrooms just form an amazing piece to our medical compendium. They impress me all the time the more I read about them, and I encourage you guys to go off and learn a little bit more. think you guys will be getting a book called Mycomedicinals written by Paul Stamets, and it will include a ton of, it'll just basically highlight all this literature on all these different things, and it's phenomenal. It's really amazing. So, kind of hit on these guys. Increases oxygen diffusion across the alveolar, so we get better, oxygen consumption throughout the body. Relaxes those bronchial musculature, asthmatics, restrictive lung diseases. I didn't mention this, but it helps to reduce lactic acid buildup in muscles, also relevant for athletes, among others. Sexual dysfunction, immediate energy reserves. Ganoderma lucidum, reishi mushroom. Again, this kind of fits the whole bill again, but yet it doesn't have the sexual libido increases that we see with cordyceps. However, anti-cancer, antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory. In Chinese medicine, this is used to help calm the Shen. And the Shen is located in the heart. Interestingly enough, from a Western perspective, this also has cardiovascular affinity, decreases cholesterol, decreases blood pressure. But also that idea of calming the Shen is like calming the spirit, or calming the mind, if you will. The Shen is the integration of all the other components of the mind, including things like the Yi, the Ji, the Po, and the Hun. You say, what the heck are those, Dr. Roth? Well, just take my word for it. They're integrated in the Shen. Well, the Yi is translated over to the intellect, and the Po is the corporeal soul, the Hun is the ethereal soul, and the Ji is the willpower. And these are housed in different organ systems, but the heart kind of is the overall manager for all of these other systems. And so if we're able to kind of calm the Shen, I like to use this for anxieties and depressions. I throw it in as part of my formulas for that reason, and there's just that traditional empirical use there. And I like to look at reishi a little bit more as a calming fungi, but yet overall helps to improve very much so energy stores. I think of this in herbal, across the hallway with the herbals. Ashwagandha kind of fits that bill. It has a nervine calming effect, but really is known to help improve overall energy. Reishi has that ability as well. But again, the elixir of immortality. This is for our aging populations, or anybody who's really under chronic stress, who's looking to manage and mitigate that stress response. Let's just remember for a second that when we're talking about stress, we're talking about circumstances that put tremendous strain on the immune system, and that is going to take its toll over long periods of time. So we're going to decrease the ability of the T cells to respond appropriately, natural killer cells, the interleukins aren't going to be released appropriately under these chronic times of stress. So mushrooms on a whole, reishi, all of these act as adaptogens that I've mentioned so far, but reishi in particular kind of fits that bill, where it's able to help retard the impacts of that stress that's happening. And so obviously long-term effects from stress can be very insidious. We just had a research publication that showed that there's a correlation between Alzheimer's disease and stress. So if you're stressed in your younger life, you have stressful incidences, you can have increased risks towards developing Alzheimer's disease. Well, that kind of makes sense in a certain regard, but it's also somewhat of a novel idea to think about. And obviously finding ways to help mitigate those stress responses is important. Not, of course, to diminish the value of sleep, healthy diet, exercise, and so forth, but this is one of those things that can do that as well. If we have a dysregulated immune system where our natural killer cells aren't doing their job, and natural killer cells are simply there to go and say, hey, you're not behaving as you should, cell, you're proliferating and not stopping, and so forth. You know, we all have this in our body every day, and our natural killer cells, their job is to go around and say, you're not doing your job right, cell, so, you know, this is your final warning. And, sorry, and the natural killer cells can get trigger happy, and they just pick off these cells that just aren't doing their job. But if we're under stress, our natural killer cells can't do that appropriately, and that goes for the other cells of the immune system as well. And if they're not doing their job right, over long periods of time, we run into these complications. So, yeah. Glutathione as well, antimicrobial. Got this whole package here. Cordyceps is a combination blend of cordyceps and reishi mushrooms. Again, all those benefits I just talked about, but what we're seeing is probably using this for improving energy levels in particular. chronic stress, adaptogenic formulas, and for sure for our aging population to help with graceful aging, this can be important. And then all those other benefits. So you want to improve overall immune status and so forth, inflammation in those regards that we've touched on. Can do that. My girlfriend thinks I've been taking too much of this. Can't imagine why. But it is an interesting mushroom. And from the Doctrine of Signatures, somebody pointed out it kind of looks like a bunch of neurons. Well, lion's mane has this constituent that's been studied over in Japan. It's called nerve growth stimulating factor that's shown to be able to regenerate the growth of nerves in the central nervous system. Implications for you name it. Alzheimer's disease, concussion, we could go on with that list. This is very impressive, very, very important finding, I think. But it also speaks to kind of the demographic we can use this for. Again, aging, Alzheimer's, students, for memory and so forth. Brain fogs and brain fatigues, probably we might find a benefit and increased response here. For mental clarity, Parkinson's diseases, I would probably try it in a number of different areas. But we have this evidence that's come out of Japan, and they've started to, what do you say here? They've patented, certain extractions. Obviously, you can't patent a natural product, but if you add a little side chain and do that little thing, you can patent that. This is showing a lot of promise for that, and the research is strong for this as well. Still has anti-cancer and a good wide spectrum of antimicrobials as well, and still has this prolific and wide range of beta-glucans and triterpenes to act in the ways that those molecules that we've discussed will behave as well for the immune system. Maitake, Grifolis frondosa, again, a big player for me when we're talking about autoimmunity, also has evidence on anti-cancer properties. And then, as I had mentioned, we're talking about modulating blood sugar levels here, and this is important as well. So if we're having pre-diabetics or diabetic patients, we can add something like this in to be able to help deal with the diabetes. Maitake has a number of different nutrients in it, so it's kind of that one again that you might say like, hey, let's go to like Maitake as that kind of daily multivitamin style of a push here to kind of up our overall nutrient reserves and so forth. So. Chaga mushroom. Chaga mushroom, again, is kind of this elixir-like mushroom, and it has a number of different anti-inflammatory components. And one of the things that it has is this great antioxidant profile in it. So if you're seeing kind of an overall need for somebody to detoxify, for instance, you might use something like this. And one of the things I didn't mention about the cordyceps is that it also has an affinity for the liver, so it upregulates liver activity and so forth. And that's interesting. Because then we can improve detoxification pathways. And chaga, with its antioxidant profile, can be used there to deal with overall inflammation load, whether that's from somebody who just has an inappropriate diet or is sedentary lifestyle or whatever that is that might be going on. Also has a wide spectrum of antimicrobials. Again, this idea that it's able to upregulate all these different cells in the immune system and improve their overall function, while decreasing inflammation at different levels and so forth from this different array of constituents that exist there. And one of the things that it is used for quite commonly is inflammation that's happening at the level of the gut. So not only in that antioxidant profile, but because it has a bit of an affinity or tropism for that area of the body, the stomach and the small intestines. Somebody asked me, about ulcers, and I think that like these kind of medicines are perfect for things like ulcers because we're able to have an antimicrobial property. We're able to have, as well as that ability to upregulate the immune system, so that we encourage our own immune system to be able to deal with these kind of infections. So MycoShield is a spray. It is a blend, and you use it if you have like acute infections. This is a nice way to use something like this. Help as an antimicrobial. This is kind of cool. Well, this here is a Stamets 7. It's just a blend of 7 mushrooms. And these 7 mushrooms are there to help support increasing the immunity of the body. We use it a lot as or in the States it's used a lot as kind of as a multivitamin and as a replacement for a multivitamin. We're almost done here. We literally have 60 seconds here. And one of the things with this Stamets 7 is that we're able to increase macrophage activity by 3,200